Good morning. It's another beautiful day here in British Columbia and Pacific Northwest of Washington State. Uh, Spring is on its way, and all my tulips are coming up, and it's a beautiful thing. Really looking forward to that. I was saying to somebody the other day, and I hope some of you garden. It's one of the times as a counselor that I get to actually plant some seeds and watch them grow and come up, and as those flowers unfold towards the sun, they are so brilliant and appreciative of being able to come alive like that. And I know for many of you people, either as parents or as professionals, we spend a lot of time investing in people and planting seeds, if you will. And we hope that the people that we plant in are good soil and that things take root and good things come from it. But we don't always get to see that. And so I hope some of you were involved in some sort of a self-care plan in which you get to see the fruits of your labor, and I love that just about some of the more simplistic things in life, whether it's me out there splitting wood, or if I'm digging in the garden and watching vegetables and flowers grow. That's really a big piece of my self-care and spiritual journey, and so many of those metaphors I can take into my life and into my professional life as well. So that being said, I wanted to follow up last night's radio show. I don't know if you had an opportunity to tune in. I may have mentioned this to you, but I'm a guest on a weekly radio show sponsored by Bula Maste Radio. That is a small station located in Langley, British Columbia. And it serves the South Asian and Fijian community across the globe and locally. And I come in and talk primarily about parent issues, but also about other things going on in the world and in our communities. But one of the things that I wanted to touch on, or I did touch on in last night's radio show, was some observations about or for parents, adults going through any kind of marital or whatever kind of relational tension or conflict. I guess you could say, especially if you happen to be going through a separation or divorce, or somebody who is. And I wanted to to really emphasize to the audience the impact that this has on youth, on our children, and of course as adults going through that specifically. It's very agonizing and can bring with it a lot of pain and anguish and despair and fear and confusion, many things. If you've been through that like I have, it's quite the storm to go through, and you wouldn't wish it on anybody. And if an adult is going through that, imagine what it is for the children. And one of the things that I mentioned last night was that you have to think about attachment theory, and attachment theory basically says is that children learn to manage their feelings through co-regulation. So in other words, children don't have a great capacity to manage their feelings, so they manage them in relationship. They manage them by watching how other people manage their relationships. And so if a couple are going through marital or relational tension and conflict, it's like an earthquake to the little kid. It shakes their world, it rocks their world, because if they're dependent on you as an adult person to help them regulate their emotions and to stabilize their psyche, then if you become unstable, then it rocks their world as well, and creates a significant degree of anxiety for them. So one thing I see a lot of when I work with families and especially if children are experiencing anxiety, is that there's been some, if you will, anxiety-producing experience going on with the adults in their life. Or maybe one or both of the adults experience some sort of an anxiety, if you will, I want to say disorder, but just have anxiety in their history. So that's pretty common to see. But yeah, especially if the couple has been in conflict and tension for a long time, and most of this tension and conflict does tend to accumulate over time if people don't do something about it. And so usually by the time I get to see a family, whatever the issues are have been long-standing. And that tells me likely that whatever the cause of the anxiety has been long-standing as well. So that means the children have been immersed in an environment or have been, connected to adults who have been experiencing anxiety or some emotional instability. Now, a lot of times parents just don't realize that. They may say, well, yeah, we've had our ups and downs, because I'll ask, how's the relationship going? Oftentimes the response is that we've had our ups and downs. Oh, how long have you been together? Well, 10 years or 15 years or whatever. Well, how long has this been going on? Well, some parents literally say, well, since the beginning. And so, okay, since the beginning, or some parents will say, well, even before our children were born. So what you're really telling me then is that, excuse me, is that your children were kind of in the presence of this emotional instability and anxiety for not only most of their lives, but even before they were born, while they were in utero. And so what can appear to the parents as kind of not a big deal, actually is quite a big deal when you think about how vulnerable children are and how necessary it is to their psyche to be connected to adults who are emotionally stable. And so, when a child or a teen spends years and years in this environment, you have to learn how to cope with it. You have to survive that. Some of you have maybe attended some of the presentations by a psychologist named Vanessa LaPointe. And I attended one of her presentations once. And, a thing she said was that, when adults don't step up, the children will. So when adults don't step up, the children will. And what that means in a certain way is that, we all have to survive and cope with stuff. And so children will first turn to the adults in their lives. And if they see that the adults are not handling things well, then the child will often step up into the adult role. So if the adult isn't willing to step up into the adult role because they're too immersed in their pain or their emotional instability, the child will then take on roles in order to survive that. And one of those roles may be to take on a more adult role. So they'll step up into the adult role. So, everybody has to deal with their anxiety, and their pain in this. And a parent must have the ability, and I say must have, I mean, it is absolutely necessary, but it's an incredibly mature thing to be able to do, which is to be able to separate yourself, to be able to set up some internal psychological divider, partition between your pain and what you're going through as an adult and your capacity to be present for your child. Now, that doesn't mean that you're lying about what's going on or you're trying to cover up what's going on, but it's that ability to be in both worlds at the same time, right? Because although as a parent we're going through our own agony and despair, we still have a loving promise to be there for our children. We still have a loving promise This is one of the things that makes my work very unique, is that no matter who I see, parents, families, or what have you, whether it's the Tuesday night parent group that I do or whatever, I always first and foremost acknowledge that the reason why people are even together, or even in the room, is because they love. There's a love story going on here. They may not be feeling it. It may be the farthest thing away, from what they're aware of in that moment. Most people come in to my room, or I meet people because they're in anguish, and they want something done about that. But what I know is that most people are in my room, and I meet people because they're in love. So this has always got to be a love story. And it's that love in and of itself that allows us to set up that partition, that we're in our own pain, but for the sake of love and for the sake of my promise to love, I'm going to do what's necessary here to make good on that promise with my son or my daughter. It's that love that becomes a stabilizing element. It's that love that gives rise to hope. So in the midst of our own trials, especially if we have little kids and teens in our lives, we've got to be able to, while we're in our pain, convey to our kids that we got it, that we're able to handle what's going on. That's stepping up into the adult role, because if we don't step up into that adult role, if we don't convey a confidence, a faith, probably more likely, that we're able to handle what's going on, then our children will be anxious. They'll see us as incapacitated, and they'll want to rescue. They'll want to step up into a rescuing kind of adult role, which really sets the stage for entitlement. That's a traumatic event. It'll set the stage for entitlement. Why? Because when a child steps up into an adult role, what do they leave behind? They leave behind their childhood. So we feel robbed of being a child. Why? Because I had to step up into an adult role and start taking care of my mom or my dad or my siblings, because my parents couldn't do it. It's not what I wanted to do, but it's what I had to do. So super important for parents to be able to, and this is where I was going with this last night, so important that what you do, your capacity to partition that pain off and to be able to be present for your children and to be able to display some confidence or some hope, to be a source of hope or inspiration or optimism, those things come from the love story. Those things come from your commitment to love. Right? So even in the midst of your anguish, that's what I'm saying. This allows both. This allows you to be authentic in your anguish, in your own personal anguish, parents, but it also allows you to convey confidence. Now, what happens when a parent can't do that usually, and their pain overtakes them primarily, as most people would do, pretty normal when people are in conflict, tension, separation, or divorce, is that they start blaming one another. They start blaming the other parent. They start complaining, they start blaming, they start bickering, they start becoming petty about the custody arrangement or these kinds of things. And that's all, first of all, it's a show of weakness. Complaining and blaming is a show of immaturity, and it's a show of weakness. So some parents think that their complaining about the other parent is a sign of, is an honorable thing. They think they're protecting their child. So when a parent thinks that they're justified in getting upset and complaining and being aggressive towards the other parent, and they think that they're trying to protect their parent or their son or daughter, or trying to stick up for them, trying to protect their rights. But what the child sees, what anybody probably would see, is that this person is losing it. When we say somebody's lost it, like this person's lost it, they're getting so upset. They're on a tirade. They're on a rant. They're blaming. They're complaining. They're nitpicking every little thing. They're in and out of court all the time. It's and of course, people think that they're righteous, right? People think they're in the right place in doing this, and they trick themselves in a lot of different ways, to justify the position that they're taking. But I guarantee you, folks, all it does is convey weakness, and all it does is scare the crap out of your kid. Because what the child sees is instability. What the child sees is anxiety. What the child sees is desperation. And it also conveys this. If my mom or dad are so quick to blame and attack and complain and nitpick and criticize, if they're if they're doing that to other people, because why? Because other people aren't perfect. If they're picking apart, the other parent for every little thing, in a child's mind, in anybody's mind, it would be, oh my gosh, that means I have to be perfect. And I'm not perfect, so guess what? I'm next. Right? So here we've got a parent yelling and screaming and picking apart. Maybe it's not even a parent. Maybe it's a system. Maybe it's a professional. Maybe it's the psychiatrist. Maybe it's the social worker. Maybe it's the family counselor. Maybe it's the garbage man. Maybe it's the neighbor next door. But this is often what happens when people are in anguish. They just start ripping apart anything they can get their hands on. That's called projection. It's this fear, this desperation, this insecurity, all this stuff that's going on for the parent is just being projected out. The parent feels so incompetent and so impotent themselves that, that gets projected out all over the place. And so this will be the parent that might be starting fights with everybody, might be picking on everybody, might be criticizing everybody. And they'll do it in the name of what they think is something honorable, sticking up for our rights, protecting my child, social justice, whatever it is. But as spectators, when we see it going on, it's scary to watch. Because you're saying in your own mind, am I next? I'm not perfect. It's only a matter of time before this rage, this anger, this criticism, this malice gets turned towards me. And this is how a parent can become their own worst enemy oftentimes when it comes to, if you will, visitation, custody arrangements, and things like this. So you've got one parent who's just in a lot of pain, and they're just projecting that pain all over the place, and they become scary to the child. And then the child starts to become hesitant or reluctant possibly to even visit them. And then, then this person over here who's in pain accuses the other parent oftentimes of conspiracy, or of trying to brainwash that child against the other parent. And the more that happens, the more that parent is stuck in that position, the more reluctance that they create on the part of the child to visit. And even when they do visit, the child doesn't want to do anything with them. They want to just stay on their phone or in their room on their computer, but they're reluctant to do anything. And so then the parent feels like they're being alienated, like they're being dismissed, like they're, not wanted anymore. And the more the parent feels that, the more they criticize, the more they try to spin a narrative of conspiracy and they just become their own worst enemy, and they'll melt down and they'll destroy their relationship with their child if they continue to do that, to go down that road of complaining and nitpicking and being petty, being critical, and doing it aggressively rather than assertively. So, it's common in these, like I can explain this to parents, and I can offer them an opportunity to do something different here, something more positive. They can kind of see, going down that road of blame and criticism is just, it's just the complete opposite of who they are and what they want to offer to their child. And they're kind of go, okay, well, I don't want to do this with that parent anymore. I'd really rather just kind of call a truce, or maybe even engage in a practice of trying to see the best in each other. But then here it comes. They'll usually say, well, I've tried that before, but the other parent just isn't cooperative. They just won't go along with it. I keep trying to be nice. I keep trying to just kind of come at this with the best intentions. I keep trying to not go down that road of blame and criticism and cynicism, but just the other parent won't meet me there. And I'm the only one doing it. And so what's the point in that? So that's what I call, kind of the 2-lane road. It takes two to tango, in other words, right? It's a 2-lane road. Each person must give something for it to work. Sounds traditional, doesn't it? But what I just spoke of was the breakdown of it. Well, what if somebody doesn't want to meet you halfway? What if somebody doesn't want to make their contribution? What if somebody doesn't want to show up for the counseling with you? What if somebody doesn't want to take that parenting course with you? Is that game over? Well, it is by that particular position, by that particular strategy, by that particular ideology. But I want to offer parents something better, something more. Remember what I said. This is a love story. And parents, what you do because you have a promise to love unconditionally. It's not that you're going, well, yeah, I have a promise to love, but it's not, this is not this is not buying a house where there's all sorts of subjects, attached to it. Well, yeah, I'll love as long as, I'll love subject to. No, that's not it. No, that's not it. When you make a promise to love your children and to do always what's best for them, that is a 1-lane road. It is a promise or a vow that you make, period. To always do right by your son or your daughter. And really, this is to do right by yourself as well, to be true to yourself. And what I was saying last night is that sometimes, and maybe a lot of times, this is human nature. We're not perfect. And so in relationship, one person or the other is always going to come up short. If I'm expecting my partner to meet me 50-50, if you want to call it that, or some people say 100-100, there's going to be times when that person's going to come up short. They're going to come up at 80%, 50%. In relationships and separations and things like this, there's a lot of times when parents are complaining, well, he didn't do this or she didn't do this right, or, back and forth, pointing out where each other are coming up short. Hey, guess what, folks? That's life. We all come up short. The question is, can you fill in the void? Can you fill in that gap, the vacuum that the other parent leaves? If this parent isn't completely present today, or, makes a mistake of some kind, or just comes up short in any way, am I willing to go 120%, 130%, 140%? Like I said, a lot of parents get stuck right there. Well, I'll go 100 if he'll go 100. So as soon as that other parent comes up with 80%, that other parent says, well, what's the point? See, that does, although traditional, see, this isn't, that's almost like a bartering of love, you know? If I do this, you'll do this. If you do this, I'll do this. No, that's conditional love. Your promise is to unconditional love. This isn't a two-way road. This is a one-way road. This is a one-way promise. And I say this way, it's that promise to love because only love can sustain this. Only love can create the happily ever after scenario. If what I'm doing is not for the sake of love and love itself because I made a promise to love, then it becomes a bartering, if you will. And what happens if I go 120 3 times in a row and the other person doesn't? Then that means a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to resent that person. Why? Because I'm making all these sacrifices. If I have to go beyond the agreement of 100, and now I'm in 120, 130, 140%, and this person isn't giving, and that was the agreement, then I'm going to feel robbed. I'm going to feel like, hey, I'm making all these sacrifices, and I'm not getting anything out of it. And so that's going to lead to resentment. And 2, that's going to lead to a sense of entitlement. So in other words, if I have to make all these sacrifices that I didn't want to make because of this other person over here who was unwilling, incapacitated, just plain out being a jerk, then I want something for it. Maybe I want money. You know, maybe I want more me time. Maybe I want a vacation. But it's going to lead to some sense of entitlement, exaggerated entitlement. That's the psychological mechanism that shows up anytime we do something against our will. Anytime we sacrifice something of ourselves against our will, under duress, whatever it is, for anything other than love, we will want compensation. And if we don't get it, this is oftentimes where, parents and people end up in court. Now they've got a judge up there who has to make the decision who owes who what. And in order to, help this judge out, you've got to spend thousands of dollars on affidavits and all sorts of other stuff, and that's all part of this traditional yet super toxic way this is done, this agreement. I want to say to you that there is a way out, but it almost takes a supernatural capacity. But what it requires is for you to deeply, deeply embrace your commitment, I want to say your covenant to love. It is a one-way road, 100, if you will, %. There are no subjects attached to it. There are no yeah buts attached to it. Period. You will do what you need to do out of the love, the deep love that you have for your child, because it is the right thing to do. You are not taking direction. You are not being influenced by the outside world. You are not being influenced by what the other parent does or does not do. You are bound by your promise of love, and you are supported and you are uplifted. The love story is an uplifting story. It's a revitalizing story. The other story is a story of misery. In other words, tit for tat, live by the sword, die by the sword, right? It's a constant battle. It's no wonder people get exhausted and have heart attacks and strokes and stuff, because it's just that. It's the constant pursuit of what people think are their rights. And people are more concerned with their rights than doing the right thing. And the right thing is to love, is to honor yourself and your son or daughter by keeping your promise to love. Now, I said this is supernatural, and you need to kind of take this in whatever way you want to take it. But I always, when I explain this to parents, I always say, if you can do this, if you can show leadership, if you can demonstrate this to your son or daughter, wow. Because it offers them the capacity to be able to do it in their own lives. Because they've seen you do it. They've seen you go farther than the distance. They've seen you go 120, 130, 140. And you didn't, excuse my language, you didn't bitch about it. You didn't complain about it. Yeah, it was tough, but you were just keeping your word. That was it. You were just keeping your word to love. And so they didn't hear all this toxic spew coming out of your mouth. They didn't see you attacking their other parent. They didn't see you attacking the social worker. They didn't see you attacking the family counselor. They didn't see you attacking the world. They saw honor. They saw emotional stability, clarity of intent, and tenacity. Those are admirable. When a child looks up to an adult and sees that, wow. That child wants to be like that adult. Why? This child is going to encounter many disappointments. Remember, all of us come up short. And so this ability to go 120, 130, 140 for the sake of love and love itself is a much needed capacity. And that comes from depth of character. But what I want to say here is that our children develop that capacity, one, because they've seen us do it, and two, because we've extended it to them, because they're not perfect either. And when we can continue to love them and keep our word and go the 120, the 130, the 140 with them, then they're able to do that with others. That's pretty easy to understand, isn't it, in terms of the parent-child relationship? Our kids look up to us, and when they look up to us, they hopefully see something admirable and inspiring, and it gives them the possibility and the capacity to do it themselves. It's like the saying, you can't give to others what you don't have to give. So just like our children, they can't give it to somebody else unless somebody first gave it to them. And this is where it becomes a supernatural, a transpersonal, it can be a spiritual journey. Where, parents, do you get your cup filled? Because you're not perfect either. You're coming up short. And yet you're loved. And it's a one-way road. One way. And this is the thing that I offer parents and people and families when I meet with them, is that, yeah, I see where you're coming up short. I see that. But you know what I know about you more than that? You know what's more true about you? Is that you're a loving, caring individual. Or family. That's what's most true about you. That's what I believe about you. That's the nectar, that's the water of life that I pour into your cup. So you can then give that to your son or daughter. Yeah, you see where they're coming up short. But what you really know about them is that they're loving and caring and committed. And so, yes, our capacity, this is the thing. Most people don't seem to have the muscle, the character, to even get to 100. They're going to go 50%, 50-50 or 75-70, 125 or maybe 100. That's a kind of a cliche thing to say now. It's 100. No, this is a one-way road, folks. That's the only way this is going to get resolved. If you're going to wait for the other person to meet you there at that boundary, like two warring countries who tentatively approach each other, and they have to find a neutral territory in order to come to some really tentative, and reluctant kind of agreement. This is not that. Because neither one of you are perfect. You're always going to come up short. So it's really easy to violate, if you will, that agreement. And you'll just be in a state of distrust and hypervigilance the entire time until your child grows of age to, kind of say to you, I've had enough of this crap, I'm out of here. And in the meantime, your child is in the middle of all this, a nervous wreck. Why? Because both parents are in distrust and they're emotionally unstable. Anything could happen. It's like walking through a minefield. Boom, anything could destabilize it and really just be a source of anxiety for your child, which the child then has to tolerate both parents not stepping up to the plate. So that child's going to try to step up to the plate. That's going to create or inflame the sense of entitlement. And there you go. You got more challenges on your hands after that, because now your child may end up out of that sense of entitlement turned to various indulgences. Hanging out with the wrong people, smoking dope, whatever, drinking, spending too much time on social media, on cell phone, all these different indulgences. And two things are going on there. There's a sense of entitlement, and then there's the need to self-regulate. This is a child who's a nervous wreck, very likely, and they needed to turn to something to help regulate those emotions. And at the same time, they also feel very entitled to them. So if you're still listening to this video right now, then I thank you, because I think you're hearing me here, because this is an opportunity to do something great, to live in that great love story, to live true to that love that is in your heart, and to let that be the very ground upon which you stand, and the ground that nourishes you, that ground that allows you to be the kind of leader and to be the kind of outstanding example that not only your child needs, but we all need. This entire world needs this. But the capacity to be able to do that, as I said, is almost superhuman, supernatural. So you got to ask yourself, where do I go? I come up short too. And where am I getting my source of unconditional love? So, and I hope that's helpful today. My heart goes out to all of you who might be going through these experiences. Like I said, I've been through it myself. It's agonizing, I know, but it is a major, initiatory threshold. In other words, this is where we get to see what we're made of. I mean, it causes us to give up certain ideas, and it also causes us to grow up into more of the kind of person that we've always wanted to be. So my heart goes out to you, and know that I'm here doing these videos for you, and please send me any questions that you might have. And if you're in the Surrey area of British Columbia, or even in the Lower Mainland, pop into my parent leadership group. This is what we talk about. This is why parents show up, is to get this kind of nourishment. Tuesday nights, 6 to 8. I would recommend that you message me here or what have you with your email address, and I'll put you on the list and get you the flyer and all the details. So again, thanks for listening, and things are going to get good. Things are getting better for sure. Have a good day.